Ladies and gentlemen, your next panel.
Hey, thank you. All right. Oh my goodness. And we've got a few more minutes to get started. So, I mean, can we start early? Okay, great. And we have 40 minutes, right? Like with some Q&A. Perfect. Okay, I didn't expect an auditorium. This changes everything. It is very bright. But yeah, so thank you, a person whose name I didn't catch. Seth. Seth. Clearly not. But yeah, so my name is Zsuzsa James. I am a senior trade commissioner at the Consulate General of Finland, based in Los Angeles. So I work with Finnish games companies, primarily helping them get situated in the US. And you may be wondering, why the heck am I moderating this panel? It's because I'm really fascinated with new technologies, and as it pertains to game dev, I'm dabbling a little bit with it in myself, and I really wanted to get this opportunity to talk with our panelists here today about some of the technologies that are coming up that may impact all of your game dev journeys as well, and the pipelines that you're working on, and so that we can geek out a little bit together. So let's get started on that. So the topic of the talk today, which I'm not sure if it's on the screen, it is not. It is. What new technologies should game developers prepare for, which is a lovely, vast, and vague topic. So we're going to talk about a lot of different things, and kind of as a preamble, obviously, because it is a large topic, we're going to touch on a few things. We are going to try to kind of like keep it relevant for most everybody. But as with anything, with with technologies in game dev and in any aspect of it, it's only as relevant as far as it's relevant to the work that you do, and so some of it may not be, but it's all going to be very, very fascinating, and so I want to jump into it with a round of introductions, which I'm going to let the people do so themselves. So we're going to just exactly, because I'm not just going to read out the bios here. I think it's more interesting if they do it. So we're going to start with the person with the most difficult name that you just clued me in on, Tadhg. To my left, Tadhg Kelly, the head of ops and game design consultant at Mobile Game Doctor. So why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself, and then we're going to go down the line.
Yep, so I'm Tadhg Kelly. I'm a 20-something year veteran game designer, producer. In the last few years, particularly a lot of work in areas like XR. I worked at Magic Leap for my sins for a while, and in VR streaming and a couple of other areas like that. Most recently, I'm working a lot with Mobile Game Doctor. There we go, that's better. The man is like, I can't hear you. I do have a very quiet voice. At Mobile Game Doctor, where we do a lot of work with both kind of traditional kind of mobile developers all across the spectrum in classic sort of genres and stuff like that. But actually we do a lot of work outside of kind of traditional mobile as well. Some amount of Web3 stuff has come across our kind of plate in the last couple of years. Some amount of XR stuff has come across our plate in the last couple of years. And actually some stuff like going back to PC games and indie games and all sorts of stuff like that. So that's who I am.
Howdy, I'm Zak Whaley. I'm the Director of Engineering at PlayEveryWare. I have a background in content pipeline and animation systems, working with designers and whatnot. I've also worked with Tadhg at Magic Leap on the perception on the perception framework team, working on sensor package processing into output APIs and whatnot. But yeah, most recently I'm now at PlayEveryWare, which is a co-development studio in Georgetown, working on cross-play certification and whatnot for a bunch of different titles. So.
Hello, Alexander Silkin here. I'm the co-founder and CTO at Survios. We are a studio in Los Angeles. Before that, I was Microsoft, NASA, JPL, and the USC Information Sciences Institute. And I fell in love with motion controls, first with Kinect and voice controls and all that. And then in 2012, I started working in VR as part of a school project at USC. It's called Project Holodeck. We were trying to basically create room scale VR with whatever janky hardware and software we had back then. Very, very hacky days, but we got something running and then kept doing it. Started Survios in 2013. Still were hacking together hardware for a bit and then eventually transitioned to just being a full-time studio. We released, I believe, 9 games at this point, 7 of which were VR exclusive on all the platforms, lots of different genres. So Creed boxing game based on Creed movies, our biggest hit, so great workout. Just be careful about not punching your TV or your friends. Lots of fun videos on YouTube about that.
Thanks, man. Hello, everyone. I'm Jeff Tromblay. Me too. I'm an industry veteran, 25 years this year in the industry. Was in your shoes, developer shoes, for most of my career. Did also a visit on the dark side of the publisher side, which was very refreshing, but also came with its bunch of challenges. But it was super exciting. I am now director of biz dev at Edgegap, which offers basically self-managed, fully automated scaling solution for your hosting and serving your multiplayer games with the best latency possible for your players. So we're going to see how all of this can come together and help you guys build better games faster and possibly with smaller teams with the same results, which means a better bottom line.
Awesome. All right. So yeah, this is great. We have a this is fantastic. We have a very XR heavy panel here, which I'm excited to talk about as well. But then let's start with this. The way I kind of like structured this talk today is that there is there is technology that is either already impacting the industry, or it's going to have a big impact within the next 2 to 3 years. So kind of like a more near-term look at what's happening and what's coming down the pipe very soon. Versus if we get around to it, hopefully we can also prognosticate a little bit longer out and peer into our proverbial kind of crystal balls for the next like 5 to 10 years and see what's coming there. And then we're gonna have some Q&A time at the end as well, so you'll have just some chance to ask some questions. But let's start with the near-term view on what's kind of like happening right now. So I want to make this kind of like a round, and we'll kind of like come back again from Tadhg here, and then we'll go down there the row. What do each of you think, and pick kind of like your two or three favorite or two or three more most impactful technologies that are either already or within the next 2 to 3 years you think is going to have the biggest impact on game development from your perspective? And feel free to kind of like go deep into it. What is it? Why it's a relevant technology? Why should developers care? How is it going to impact their pipelines and their workflow? If you have some examples, great. And then obviously, as it's the focus of this talk is how should they prepare for the arrival of those technologies. So I know this is a lot, but let's get started. We'll see what happens. So Tadhg, why don't you take it away?
I really need to get this close. So I think 3 things really kind of pop to mind, and they're kind of a fairly diverse list. One is there is obviously a kind of a lot of continuing development in both like AR and VR technologies, which could be, I tend to generally describe as kind of faster, better, smaller. So, faster in terms of like better performance in the headsets and all that sort of stuff. In AR's case, for example, things like wider FOVs, which you are probably going to talk about a little more authoritatively than I will. And a lot of kind of, focus on sort of just delivering cheaper headsets. There's a lot of competitors that are coming up to Oculus, for example, that have actually largely achieved parity with the Quest 2 now. Meta. Sorry, it's not Oculus. Oculus for life. And that kind of thing. So there's a fairly obvious kind of linear sort of development going on there. At the same time, there's quite a lot of what feels like calcification in that space, and there's quite a lot of like the story feels like it is repeating itself a little bit. If that makes any sense. Like and this kind of comes
At a certain age, with a certain number of years in the industry, you kind of see those movements coming.
You definitely do. You definitely do. You definitely do. Particularly, I mean, it's kind of like, so there's a sort of like, okay, you know, we're all evangelical, if you like, about the technology long term, but there isn't actually a kind of a breakthrough kind of element to any of that story next. The one area that I find myself that I keep obsessing on is the interface and the input method and that sort of thing. So at the moment, basically every VR headset is essentially like a broken up controller, where you have like two sides of a controller and you're sort of doing things within the space, which is okay, but not great for complicated, if you like, nuanced and sort of workplace ready kind of input. And so the thing that sort of is holding back a lot of the development in the space is that. And so the thing I'm looking for is a kind of a most pressing technology trend within the space is who's going to break through on coming up with an input method that's better than what we've basically been dealing with for the last 10 years. Not yet. No, I mean, I've seen a few kind of bits and pieces. Things like Tap had a sort of a finger keyboard thing, which is kind of rubbish. Right. And I saw some weird thing the other day about a
natural input, natural interaction
kind of thing. Yeah, gesture reaction. But the gesture reaction stuff kind of only works so well because it's kind of reliant on perspective from here, and so you can't quite tell where fingers are and stuff. But something in that sort of area, I think, that's the most pressing and most important need within the space. I like having better screens and having better battery life and stuff like that is obviously also important. But having some way to actually more meaningfully interact in XR beyond sort of drawing and swinging your arms is kind of the most important thing. Beyond that, in a completely different vein, Unreal 5 feels like it's a fairly big important thing. Just so far as developer interest, feels like that there's going to be a lot more support within the Unreal ecosystem on a third-party level than there has been maybe sort of in the last few years, because a lot of that's been much more Unity focused. But I'm consistently seeing people, particularly from non-gaming spaces, non-traditional gaming spaces, like literally losing their minds over how much they can do in Unreal. And so it feels like it's going to change an awful lot. Yeah. 2-3 years ago, that would have been more of an 80-20. Yeah. And so, like, that is part two. Is for me is the impact of that, if you like, and that is very much a faster, better, stronger kind of play, but it is a very dramatically faster, better, stronger play. So, kind of seeing how that's going to impact out. And then the third thing is, in a very, very different vein, is community features. Like, one of the things I think that we don't talk about an awful lot. I should probably talk about Web3 or whatever, but I'm more interested in what exactly is Discord going to do with all those users, right? What exactly are they going to do to leverage and not just kind of help building kind of the existing communities that they have and supporting them and stuff, but are they actually going to flip over into becoming, say, a primary streaming channel? Are they actually going to properly flip over into being like a, the main game store that people actually buy stuff through? Like, there's a lot of kind of very interesting, I think, kind of opportunity there that's extremely underutilized at the moment in terms of, like, people chat on game servers and all that sort of stuff, but in terms of like I feel like the access into the customer, there's an awful lot there that we're just kind of taking for granted at the moment, but I feel like Discord's actually going to try and do an awful lot with. So those are my three.
Cool. I actually had some related things on that in particular, but one for the other side of XR besides input, basically being able to have co-presence in a larger and larger space. Like, we've been going from like lighthouses to inside-out tracking and whatnot, but then we also have inside spaces, outside spaces. You have spatial anchors. You have like all sorts of loop closure over large distances. And how do you design content for arbitrarily large systems? How do you reason within something in an environment that you don't know as a developer? Like, those are really interesting things as this is becoming more and more present. And I know at one point you had brought up Niantic's drawing a blank, Lightship API for doing that in a broader environment. But then also bridging on your topic on Ue5 Content Systems. There's just so much going on, particularly with like the hardware tessellation and whatnot for the tessellation of large systems for Nanite, being able to actually completely change how content is being generated. Instead of having the high-res models be something that's discarded, it's now like the primary asset, and how do you like bundle things appropriately, how do you store them, how do you be able to effectively and efficiently like distribute them in your systems. And subsequently, as part of that, like we have further advancements in storage, like PCIe lanes have, people are like, oh, you finally moving to SSDs and whatnot, but it's realistically like that's archaic now. Having faster, like every new generation coming out is essentially, twice the bandwidth of the previous one exponentiating, and so that we've completely bypassed limits on being able to pull things in, but that changes how we do level streaming. This changes how we do thinking about structuring our content and how we access it. And then, and it's also funny that you bring up Discord. Subsequently, there's community aspects and features. As we have larger and larger co-presence with other people, think about like moderating that. Like huge systems, massive amounts of content. Like how many hours of footage is uploaded to YouTube every day? So like we consider that, the algorithm, and there's like a combative element of like algorithm this, algorithm that. But realistically, at the end of the day, there's just an inordinate amount of content. And the same thing is happening with communities. And how do you effectively manage communities? There are certain machine learning and deep learning systems such as Spirit AI for text and Modulate AI for audio, toxic voice analysis. So there's things like that.
Yeah, speaking of machine learning, it's a big frontier. So many uses of that tech. I think the one I want to mention is Dlss. I think it's 2.0 that is AI-assisted NVIDIA solution for essentially up-resing image in a very intelligent way. So you can render 1080p and it just upscales it to 4K, and it competes with native 4K, and that's just almost like pressing a button and you get free performance.
Free upgrades.
Yeah, which is massive. I mean, normally they always say there's no such thing as a free tick box. It still requires training, setting up infrastructure, etc. But at the same time, still the gains are big, and once that trickles down to something like a Nintendo Switch 2.0 that everyone keeps allegedly leaking, but it keeps not coming out. And eventually, hopefully, it will come out with that. We'll be seeing mobile games running, not even on the cloud, like on the device, with obviously no cloud latency at 4K resolution, which will be just massive. Anytime we can squeeze out more performance with less, we'll get better visuals, especially nowadays when we're talking about ray tracing, which I think is the other thing that I want to bring up. Obviously, that Ue5 is pushing that with global illumination with their Lumen solution, and all the other developers are also doing ray tracing, global illumination with other solutions. So obviously that's like we mentioned before, it's going to change how we create levels. No longer you're going to have to spend so much time iterating because you'll just be able to just use what you see instead of baking. There'll be also other interesting use cases of just that hardware accelerated ray tracing, like for sound and such, and who knows what else. And I think the last one I want to point out is haptics. I think there overlaps with some of what was mentioned about inputs. We already have finger tracking, which is kind of great, but when you're grasping at air, that doesn't provide much for such a good user experience. But I'm really excited about what we are seeing with DualSense controller. I think the Nintendo Switch had something that was kind of building up to that. So the DualSense is the next generation of that. Plus also they have adaptive triggers. So it still feels like we're almost like in the Stone Age of haptics, but at the same time, coming from nothing to something is such a big leap.
The last 6 years has been amazing.
Yeah, so it's still not, there's the issue of lack of standardization. You got to give credit to Xbox. They had the triggers first that had those haptics, and already playing racing games, for example, felt amazing. So even though they seem like really small, archaic, limited devices, at the same time, compared to nothing, they are able to increase the immersion so much more. So anyone who hasn't tried a DualSense, highly recommend it. Even just watching like a cinematic, a movie, just sells the experience. It feels like you're in a movie theater being blasted by, low frequencies. And the PlayStation VR is introducing headset haptics, and that's just one single motor. I was really hopeful that was going to be more positional, because we got the dev kit and I was feeling the little the things, and I thought for a second it was actually going to be positional. So right now it seems like it's just single motor, so you'll be able to just control frequencies and amplitude just like the legacy controllers of the past, but at the same time, again, coming from nothing to something. And I'm sure in the future we'll expect even better haptics in the head. And coming from boxing, I want to feel like I get punched in the face. Maybe I'm just. Sure? I don't know. I got into boxing after working on the game. That was we started doing it for research, and now I still keep up to as my workout. So yeah, I just really like getting punched in the face. So head haptics and hopefully like body suits. I've seen those lots of different implementations at conferences. They look great. I'm excited, but again, with the lack of standardization, and until a big platform holder actually releases something, we're not going to see much movement there. But I think that's the future to input and interaction. So, and I'll pass it off. Yeah.
Cool. A lot has been covered. Obviously, I have to agree. The world of XR is. I did a 4-year intrusion in the world of VR and XR. Developed some. I was focused on implementing XR realities, X realities, should I say, in the real world, in retail, and launched the world's largest. What do they call it? Retail sales help experience to demonstrate products in on-premise and so on and so forth. I think optimization, if we got to check out, if there's one word I want to be on the lookout for the future, is optimization. Optimization is a contraction of optimization through automation. Developers have limited resources. Even larger indie developers, you still have limited resources. Nobody has unlimited resources except a few guys, but they do whatever they want anyways, and they're not here today. I'm talking to you guys. Automation will enable you to go faster, to test your speed to market, to increase your speed to market and test your market with your concept, with your game, with your controllers, with various user bases worldwide. This is true for workflows, pipelines, as well as infrastructure management services that we offer. You have to go faster. There's a lot of views out there. You're only a few today, but there's a lot of views out there who are working really hard to get the next entertainment blockbuster in our face. But everyone's running the race. Don't try to reinvent everything. There are tools out there. There are third parties that you can rely on. Make sure that they become your first party partners. Those third parties are there to support you. Their success is your success, and your success is their success. I think that's important. Once again, don't reinvent the wheel. I've heard too many times in my career teams of developers, unfortunately, and smart engineers, don't get me wrong, way smarter than I am, but say, yeah, we can do it faster, cheaper, and shorter time frame than this thing that exists. And that's a lie. That's a lie. You will not be able to do that because it's not your sole focus in life. So what technologies should you look for? Any technology that will help you produce your game faster, better, and put it out to market to test it out. You need to put that game in front of people. It's as simple as that. And that's where you'll get validation, and then you can start scaling.
Great. Yeah, mic drop. Yeah. No, that's great. And actually, that's a great segue to because you touched on it, and I think Alex touched on it as well, on machine learning as it plays very heavily into that getting faster and more efficient, either when it comes to procedural content generation or testing and automation, and obviously it's increasingly playing a more and more important part in game dev. So I did want to ask from all of you is what particular technologies or what aspect do you think machine learning will play in the game dev pipeline in the within the right now, or within the near future, and then potentially long term, either in co-creating content, or like how should developers think of machine learning and AI in game dev? Anyone can jump in.
Sure. I even noticed something. This morning. Someone I'm connected with on Tim. He's an artist in the game industry, and he said it seems from everyone that I've been reviewing, there are two types of artists out there when it comes to this all this AI art content generation. It's like, I'm not so sure how I feel about this, and there's licensing rights, and I think I'm going to potentially be replaced. And the other one is like, hey guys, look at this kit bash of my kit bash that I made with AI. Isn't it cool? I think that there's going to be a lot of things from narrative design, from GPT-3, potentially Meta AI, like those kinds of like text-based things. I think there's maybe story blocks, story generation, things like that. You can gather inspiration in a mood board like narratively, but even like Dlss and whatnot, image generation, which is even crazier than some of the deep mind whatever content generation. Like, I think that there's a lot of interesting leverages on even prior to even thinking about anything from like a model that's like running in your system, like just a tool that you can use on your desktop or leverage your cloud. I think there's some interesting resources that way.
Yeah, so I think the scary thing about machine learning is that it takes away the control from the creator. The machine kind of makes something up, which is also scary once you start to extrapolate that and you get to like Terminator and the machines take over and kill us all, right? That's what everyone's predicting.
My next question.
He'll be back.
But
5 to 10 years.
So I think this technology is exciting, but at the same time, I think we have to wrap our heads around about how do we mix our desire to control everything and perfect everything versus just relinquishing control.
Letting the machine do it.
Right, and maybe even taking our jobs in some ways. But I think it's about creating tools that let us efficiently maybe edit the result or integrate the result. So I think one solution that comes to my mind, I have a really good friend, Andrew Maximoff. He's working on a startup called Promethean AI. And they're working on AI-assisted level creation tools where you can use natural language processing, voice controls, and also you can type out instructions. So you can basically describe verbally what kind of scene you want, and it spits that out to you. And they're engine agnostic, but they work with Unreal, and you're then able to edit the scene further. And then if you say you move a table, it will still apply additional processing to that, and say you move a table like where the window is, it'll move the window out of the way, but it'll still again give that control back to the user to allow to edit the result further. So I think it's about trying to create tools. Right now we're able to spit out imagery, so Dlss spits out really crazy art, and I'm excited about potentially using that to, I don't want to say replace concept artists, but I guess speed up concept artists. But the problem is it can't, right now it just spits out some crazy stuff and some of it looks really cool, but at the same time it doesn't quite do what you want to do, right? So how do we create tools that allow you to edit that further? And I was just reading a white paper about, I think it was at SIGGRAPH last year, where they were showcasing a solution where they were able to take traditional scene graph description of how we used to in 3D world and feeding that through a machine pipeline and able to predict that scene, and building towards a future where we're able to essentially render some of the scenes using neural networks, but still have control by directly injecting the matrices and models of specifically what we do want, right? So I think that will be kind of like the next generation of render, where we're able to combine neural network results with traditional 3D pipelines that artists and designers are used to.
If I can just dive in. I was going to joke, Alex, that you may find yourself like on the dark side of concept art Twitter. People are going to be like, did you see this guy in Seattle? What the hell did he say?
To your point, I mean, ML and AI is a large bucket. It's an immense bucket. It's somewhere down the line, I don't know, spare me the expression, I might go on the dark side too, but it's a little overrated bucket. It's not ready yet. We can predict some player patterns. We can predict some traffic patterns. There needs to be a lot more effort and development put in on the data acquisition, and then starting parsing through that data just in itself is a tremendous task. Asking ML or AI to replace the creative minds, the creative wrists of the artists that do the rendering, whether they be, mock-up artists or whatever level, that raw talent that we have, the natural intelligence that we have, I don't think is going to be replaced so soon. Automation, on the other hand, can benefit from ML and AI, obviously, because those become predictable patterns. And those are good areas to focus on. Predictable or auto generation, let me tell you what I see and you make it for me, it's not going to happen soon. There will be flaws, and actually I think there needs to be the human control factor to the end. It can facilitate, it can blurt out that first draft a lot easier, possibly faster than a human being can do it. But that fine-tuning, those subtleties that you want to put into something, the machine can't do that. Not yet. Not yet.
The way I always think it, and I think it's going to prove out pretty much the same for machine learning, is that you're looking at it as if you look at it as a labor-saving device to help you author better, that's the way to look at it. If you're looking at it as a way to sort of, be able to plug your game idea into an engine and fire all your designers and just make a video game or whatever, that's never going to work. And I've run into some studios who have that idea in mind, that they just have this notion that if they could just get the creative out of the way and just have the machine do the thing, then they would be billionaires, but it never, ever, ever works. So yeah, it's always going to be, these kinds of technologies are always going to be the thing that help larger studios kind of optimize better, that help smaller studios particularly catch up faster and be able to produce much higher quality content in a much less expensive fashion, as you see in indie gaming all the time now. It's kind of crazy how good indie games have become. But they're never going to replace the actual kind of authorship of a game. They're never, ever, ever going to get to the point where it's like you can just crank the handle and make video game go. So,
make a game, get a game.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, I think if you look at the progression of any kind of like content generation tools, that's always how it is. Like even the advancements of Photoshop was not meant to be used the way it is, and it's totally like concept artists like bang it all sorts of different ways. But even things like the ideation process and photo bashing, and among concept artists, photo bashing, where you take a bunch of art and try to warp it around and try to like kind of ideate from like existing textures and imagery and whatnot. That is controversial, and it is less and less controversial over time. This is the same thing as just sourcing new ideation. Like there's ideation games, there's the Reckless deck for coming up with ideas for character and concept creation about like, what is this character? So anything that's just like, this is a guided tool for helping inform some of the creative decisions that I want to be able to make, I think is perfectly ideal. And there's even other things of having that guiding hand in the tool itself. I can't remember the name of the YouTuber off the top of my head, Joel something, I think. He has a bunch of little skits where the way he films it is he records himself, and he has this AI tool where he MS Paints over a frame, and then he trains it on a couple of frames, and then like lets it add it at the rest of it into this weird kind of sketchy like interesting thing, and you can guide like I want some sky here, I want some, yeah.
It's infancy.
Yeah.
So you can't rely on that today to do your what you have to do. It's a great outlook, though.
Yes. Okay, great. So I want to make sure that we give the opportunity for the audience to ask some questions. We have about 6 minutes left. Sorry, 7. So 6:53, 52. So if you have anyone has any questions, just feel free to jump up to the mic over there. And or Renee.
Well, no, Renee.
You can just yell it out.
Renee, we have to have you the mic because it's live streamed. So while you come
Sorry,
to the
Renee,
mic,
you're
I
gonna
do have a
have to
question
make
for you online. So in regards to anything unique that's been implanted, like rare earth metals under the skin as control input devices, have you guys looked at any of that yet so far?
I'm not going to put that under my screen.
I've seen a
have no
couple
opinions on
of
this.
demonstrations, yeah. Okay.
I can't wait to do it.
Remember Wired many years ago, back in the 90s or early 2000s?
Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's going to happen. Is it scary? Hell yeah.
All right, Renee?
Yeah, so it sounds like several of you have worked with technologies like the Kinect, which are relatively simple technologies that greatly expand the functionality of game systems. Do you think there is modern use of such technologies, or we'll see similar ones that are really amplifying the use of these systems going forward?
So that's an interesting one. I haven't heard the name Kinect in a while. I mean, the thing with those kinds of games and that kind of system is that it did ultimately, I don't want to use the word novelty because that's sort of that's very sort of, down-putting. But it did sort of lack a lot of robustness in terms of what you could do with it beyond, as I mentioned with the VR earlier, swinging your arms around. And so that there was a lot of there was a natural, I suppose, kind of stopping point for the kinds of games that worked very well on that sort of system. And I haven't seen anybody sort of try and figure out like what a next generation version of that would be yet. I would love to see it though, because I do remember enjoying those games quite a bit, but I don't know.
Well, I feel like finger tracking is the next generation of version of that, right? I don't know if any of you tried, is it Hand Lab or something on Oculus Quest, where you're mostly just playing around with fingers and physics. And granted, I don't know if they'll be able to take those mechanics and make a Call of Duty out of it. So maybe it's going to fall down the same wayside as Kinect, where there's going to be a few fun experiences with just using fingers for stuff, struggling to do basic tasks like, I don't know, grinding pencils or something. But I mean, I think I think for social games, for casual games where you're just using gestures, and I mean, isn't that basically how you use the HoloLens as well, right? So I haven't been in that space that much, but I'm sure you can make, Angry Birds and all that. A lot of those social games where you're just picking things up and putting them in the right place. Yeah.
Yeah, I know. I guess considering that more on the topic of input control kind of systems with XR, like it is hard because of the lack of the feedback of like what you're talking about with hand tracking. That is the way that is most certainly like the ideal way to go because it's so natural and it's controllerless. But you do have the precision of controllers and things like on the Magic Leap one. It not only had some of the optic aspect of being able to be within the field of view, but then you also have the ability to go around through, so you can control like from a much larger area all of your actions. So having that kind of precision is important, but I think that there's better models that need to be generated to be able to have good, like high fidelity hand tracking.
I feel like maybe a lot of that is just like our voice controls are so much better nowadays, and that's what the Kinect is trying to do. Motion controls, voice controls. It's like standing in front of a TV and trying to like swipe your hand versus just telling exactly the TV what you want. It's just way more efficient. But there's a barrier of being comfortable to talk to the TV, and I feel like different demographics are like I'm still forget that I can do that I can quickly, like I have a sound bar and I can tell it what music to play, but I'm still so hardwired that I have to like go on my phone and type exactly what I want. But then I feel like generations that are growing with that are much more used to that. And I think on the flip side, I think like Microsoft did a big push to put touchscreens and everything so that laptops are tablets, right? So I think nowadays you can and the younger generations are used to the fact that, I see a screen, I want something on the screen, and just go tap it, right? So why use gestures when you can just tap and touch the thing that you want?
Babies do it. Babies do it. I'm a recent grandfather, and it's amazing at 15, 16 months, looking at that little thing who grabs a tablet and literally picks what she wants. She points at what she wants. When we can get to that level of interaction with a device, by what technology, I don't know. It's going to go through a lot of studies, a lot of analysis of how we actually interact with our environment. I know Apple has been doing that for a lot of years. The greatest example is their first release of the iPhone, the iPad, and so on and so forth. They were revolutionary in that front, but there has been no revolution since. And somewhere down the line, are we due for that? I think the integration or the proliferation of XR technologies will force us into that direction, because it's a critical element of the overall experience, input-output.
Yeah. Okay, so we've got less than a minute left. So I do want to make sure we still touch on this within that time frame. So just literally, we talked about the near term. What about the long term? What do you think in 10 years, like looking out 10 years from now, is going to be the single biggest technology from, there's no right or wrong answer, just whatever you think it is, the single technology that's going to have the single biggest impact on game dev and how it's going to transform. So yeah, just a few seconds.
In 5 seconds or less. Very briefly, I do think there actually is there are legs to this whole kind of blockchain sort of thing. The current sort of rev of games that you're seeing using that sort of technology are essentially blockchains that are then trying to gamify themselves, which are not particularly interesting. But there are, and I work with several studios who are working very hard on basically making, which you might call quote unquote real games, that incorporate the technology in a more sort of considered fashion. I think that is actually going to end up having a very big impact on the games industry.
I actually think kind of weirder left field access to broader access to broadband internet with things like Starlink and whatnot to more remote and rural communities. I think it's going to have not only access to information, but also access to more communities and whatnot with higher bandwidth of interesting content. And so I think they're just going to have to consider that in the next 10 years for sure. Like, there's just so many different things with gameplay, design, monetization, but communities, like all sorts of things, you can make certain assumptions. Like older school consoles, you can't. Yeah, sorry.
Everything rendered on the cloud.
Oh, geez, that's scary. Fighting the #1 enemy of any multiplayer experience today, which is lag. So bringing the computing power closer to the player, as we did with CDN, we're going to be witnessing the birth of application distribution networks. CDN is content static. As far as ADN, application delivery network, will bring the processing power closer to the user, providing a flawless experience to the user, because you can build the best experience. If that network, if that availability and that connection between two individuals is crappy, what's the experience? Crappy.
Alex, last word?
Oh, I said everything rendered in the cloud.
Oh, perfect. Okay, everything in the cloud. And I'm going to add one more, BCI. All
Ladies
righty.
and gentlemen, our panel, thank you guys so very much. Alex, you get to stay because you are leading the next talk.